guys, David Stewart here. I'm responding to a little bit of an inquiry from somebody on the channel, and that is how do I increase the life of my strings? And that's actually kind of a complex question. There should be a simple answer, which is wipe your strings down, but there's actually more to string wear than just wiping the strings down and corrosion. There's two different kinds of string wear that occur on the guitar. The first kind is the kind that most people think of, which is corrosion. When your strings will look dull or lifeless, or they look really gross, they start to lose color, and this kind of turn rust colored on the classical guitar. That's a corrosion of the strings, and that will kind of decrease the life of your strings. As strings become corroded, the high frequencies of the strings start to roll off, and you get kind of a dull thud. This is a student guitar, and it's not a particularly bright guitar, but the strings are a little bit dead. You start to get that kind of thuddy sound as the strings corrode. So that's one way that they wear. The other way that they wear, which is really the more significant way that they wear, is not through corrosion, but through mechanical wear. That means the fret pushing against the string will wear the string out. The hands playing the string are going to wear the string out. So those are the two kinds of wear that you're going to have on your strings when you're trying to increase the life of them. So the first thing to think about is actually if you notice that your strings get corroded rather quickly, that probably has to do with your body chemistry. My strings don't really corrode very much, not on the classical or the electric at least. And on the acoustic guitar, on the steel string acoustic, the bronze alloyed strings, they tend to corrode not particularly fast where my hands tend to play them. So I don't think my particular hands don't corrode strings. However, I've known people that they play on their guitar and then their strings come out all black and gross because they may have acidic sweat. So if you have acidic sweat or you're a particularly oily person, there's nothing wrong with that. It just means that that's going to react more with your strings. So in terms of preventing corrosion to your strings, the way that you can increase the life of your strings is just to wipe them down with a soft cloth after each cleaning. There's also some cleaning products on the market that are basically alcohol-based that will just pull the grease off the strings and pull the acid off the strings and kind of neutralize it so that your strings won't get quite so dull and dingy. The mechanical wear part of string wear is a little bit more difficult to counter. Mechanical wear occurs because the strings are touching metal of frets. They're touching your hands or your pick. And mechanical wear occurs on both classical guitars and on steel string guitars, electric guitars, and that sort of stuff. Mechanical wear can happen because of a bunch of different things. One thing is that if you have like a nylon string guitar, the frets are made out of like a nickel silver steel alloy, and they are harder than the strings because the strings are steel and silver wrapped, silk, and in this case nylon. So the string, the fret is going to wear into the string, and that's what's going to wear it out primarily are the frets. On a steel string guitar, the strings and the frets are the strings are probably still a little bit softer, but they're closer in hardness. And what that really means is that when you have the frets bumping in to on a steel string guitar, you're going to get wear on the frets as well as wear on the strings. So if you've ever heard of recrowned frets and that sort of stuff, you don't really need to recrown frets very much on a classical guitar just because of the difference in hardness. You're not going to wear the frets down quite as much, except maybe on the bass string side a little bit. But certainly the fret wear on a classical guitar is a lot less than the fret wear on an acoustic guitar. Well, is there anything you can do to prevent your guitar from having its strings wear out due to mechanical failure, due to just the physical mechanical wear on the strings? And the answer is yes. The first thing is judge how hard you press the strings. If you press very, very hard, you may actually be pushing the string against the fret a lot harder than you think you are doing. Another thing is if you're doing a lot of string bends. If you're doing a lot of string bends, particularly on a steel string guitar, you may find that the string will actually wear against a not a smooth fret. The frets aren't totally polished, so you'll actually wear the string a little bit as if you're using a piece of sandpaper or a file against the string. So the string will start to wear that way. I should also mention, if you're playing a steel string guitar and you're playing with stainless steel frets, which are a thing, stainless steel is harder than the sort of nickel steel that you usually make frets out of. Stainless steel frets are going to cause significantly more string wear than traditional frets. That's just, it's kind of a well-known thing in playing circles. And the trade-off is that stainless steel frets themselves don't wear down as much. And if you want to play on stainless steel strings, which have a little brighter tone, you're going to need stainless steel frets so you don't just chew up your frets. So stainless steel frets, they're a little harder to work with, they're harder to put on your guitar, but they do not wear down quite as much, and they don't require as much polishing, so they come out kind of smooth right from the get-go. But the trade-off is that because the material is harder than your strings, the harder material is going to wear into the softer material. This is like a basic concept of hardness. So if you have hard frets and softer strings, yeah, you're going to get more string wear. That's why we tend to get more string wear on the classical guitar. So if you're pushing really hard, that's one way that you can start to change it with technique. You can learn to play with a lighter touch. Remember, you only need to press hard enough to make the string sound without a buzz. You don't need to grip the string and push it all the way down to the wood. Just hard enough to make the string meet the fret. That's as much pressure as you actually need on the classical or the steel string guitar. You don't need to play with a ton of pressure. Something that can help that as well is having a really good setup with a nice low action rather than having a really high action where you're having to work really hard all the time and you may be slamming harder into the frets. So a good setup and a lighter touch with the left hand will make your strings last a little longer. Another thing with the classical guitar, this is something particular for classical guitar, if your nails are not well polished, and mine are not right now, you're going to start scratching up the strings quite a bit. And these actually do not have a big scratchiness to them right now, I think because I have students play it without nails, but if I'd been playing with these kind of nails on these strings, you'd start to hear that's string wear. That's mechanical string wear on the trebles. You could prevent that by polishing your nails a lot. Another thing about classical guitar is that the bass strings do wear out faster than the treble strings, which is sort of the opposite of what people think should happen because the treble strings are nylon, they're like a plastic material, and the bass strings have steel on them. They appear more robust, but that's actually not the case. The steel strings you'll tend to wear out the windings, particularly on like the fourth string. I wear out the fourth and fifth string quite quickly because the winding around the string is very, very small. So I tend to change my basses twice as often as my trebles. So once my basses wear out, I put a new set of basses on. Once they wear out again, then the trebles are usually worn out, and I change all the strings. But the reason that they wear out, the metal wrap strings, is that metal doesn't have as much of a spring back effect as the nylon does. The nylon you can really stretch and it kind of pops back. And the example that I use is a wooden or a plastic spoon versus a metal or steel spoon. So if you push back on the plastic spoon and let it go, it pops back into the original shape of the spoon. That's because plastic tends to spring back into its assumed shape. Whereas if you take a metal spoon and you bend it back, it just stays bent. So as these wires become deformed from being pressed into the fret, they're going to eventually become bent, twisted, and break. So the metal does wear out mechanically actually faster than the nylon. Kind of counterintuitive, but when you really think about it, that's the way it works. So preventing mechanical wear is something that you're not going to be able to fully avoid. One of the things that I do to sort of lengthen the life of strings is I select strings that tend to last longer. That's one thing you can do. I play Savarez Alliance strings, and for me, they really do last longer than other brands. If I play a set of D'Addarios, they'll die fairly quickly, sometimes within the day if I'm playing a lot. Whereas Savarez really seem to hold their life for several weeks before the high end starts to really die off. And when we're thinking about strings sort of dying, when they stop becoming brilliant and bright, what you're losing is the higher frequencies. That high, bright, crisp tone, the articulation that occurs, that starts to get rolled off, so you get a kind of like that to me should be very bright, but it's fairly muddy. So you get a loss of the high frequencies, and that's when you know it's really, the strings are becoming worn out. Besides seeing like, they're unwinding, you definitely need to change them. But if you start to have them be dull, that means you're losing the higher end. It's time to change the strings. So I use Savarez. They do for me last quite a bit longer, and that's because their nylons are made out of some kind of other composite material. I don't know quite what it is, but it does work, and their bases are a little more resilient as well. But like I said, I do change the bases twice as often as the trebles. Now for a steel string acoustic guitar, something that I have used and recommend depending on the player are plastic coated strings. Those are like the Elixir brand strings. What those strings do is they will prevent the corrosion wear that you get that's really, really common on bronze wrapped acoustic guitar strings. They tend to look very, like tarnished bronze. They tarnish quickly. And as they tarnish, they tend to lose their life. They really do. So what the Elixir strings, and I actually use D'Addario brand plastic coated strings, and I like those. And those are a little cheaper, and I think they're just as good. So you can check those out. What that does, it'll prevent that corrosion from making the strings die without having to constantly clean the strings. But it won't prevent the mechanical wear. So if you're buying elixirs can be quite expensive, and you're playing very, very often, and you are going to change the strings on your acoustic guitar really often, you're probably going to find that elixirs are not a great value because you will still mechanically wear the string out fairly quickly. They're not, in my experience, I should say, they are not any more robust or resilient for the mechanical wear against the frets and with the hands. So in that case, if you're changing your strings really often, you don't really need to worry about the corrosive part on an acoustic guitar. You just change the strings to whatever you like because you're going to mechanically wear them out before they become corroded. But if you're like me and you don't play the steel string guitar all that much, I'm a classical guitar player and I play this style of guitar much more than I play a steel string guitar, then I think the plastic coated strings are a really, really good option. I put them on my guitars, and then when I need the guitar, it comes out of the case and it sounds bright and brilliant, and when I don't need it, I put it away, and I don't have to worry about the strings melting away to mush. The plastic coated strings really do prevent the corrosion. So those are some options that you can look at for that. So if you really want to lengthen the life of your strings, pick strings that are going to have a long life. Wipe the strings down if you have kind of corrosive sweat or oily hands or anything like that. Learn to play with a lighter touch on the left hand. That'll lessen the fret wear on your strings. And make sure that you're using strings that match the wear of the frets, that match the hardness of the frets. If you're using steel string, or if you're using regular nickel electric guitar strings on an electric guitar with stainless steel frets, you're going to break the strings a lot more. You're going to wear them out a lot quicker because those materials are of a different hardness. Whereas if you use those with standard nickel silver frets, you're not really going to have an issue with it. So your strings are going to wear out more quickly on a stainless steel fret. So those are the things that you can do to try to lengthen your string life. The other thing is every player has a different sort of comfort zone when it comes to their string wear. I'm more comfortable with worn out strings, I think, than other people because I'm just more in tune with my wallet. All right, I'm gonna have to wrap this up. More in tune with my wallet. But for you, you may have a different tolerance for how worn out you like your strings. So if you really got to have bright, crisp strings on all the time, find a good brand that's cheap that you can change out a lot. If you're like me and you're kind of okay with them worn for a little while, pick some good long life strings like Savarez and then change the basses twice as often as the trebles on classical guitar, and you'll probably do okay. Other than that, there's no magic fix for lengthening the life of your strings. You just have to pick the best of all available trade-offs and do what you can to minimize the impact on your wallet. So thanks so much for watching. You can find me on my websites, dvspress.com, davidvstewart.com. Find me on Facebook at facebook.com/davidvandykestewart. Let me know what you want to see. I really appreciate you watching, and I hope you have a great, great day.